Episode 0, man. First of
Episode
many.
0. Wow, I've never done this before, but
That's so
technology is
cool.
amazing.
Yeah, it's like multimedia. You're your own producer. You're a, it's awesome, Paul.
Well, this is completely free form, and for anyone who's going to watch this now or later, this is Jason's idea. It's his fault this is happening. It's Jason, can you let's introduce yourself?
So I'm Jason Lau. I met Paul through workshops at True Fusion. And I would actually say it's your fault because if I didn't do your clarity workshops and actually meet you and get compelled to feel like that there is something bigger in terms of our connection that I feel isn't even just for us, but it's something that you taught me about what Dharma is. And I think that'll be one of the conversation points probably is like feeling that there's something bigger for my purpose, not just for the sense of like, oh, I want to raise myself up, but this idea of raising other people around me. And that actually gives me a greater sense of fulfillment.
Oh, that's very, very well said. You started to say who you were, but do you want to say anything else about? Do you want to say anything else
I
about how
am
you
you.
came?
I am just a student.
I beg to differ. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit about your medical background?
So I am a family medicine physician. I went to medical school at Western University. It's an osteopathic medical school, and then I did a MD residency here at it was previously called UNLV. I think it's called Corkian at UNLV, and then I worked at Dignity Medical Health for a couple of years, and then I quit and transitioned. I'm transitioning for Intermountain Health, but specifically going to be the primary care doc for Red Rock Casino. So that's actually a new development. Paul didn't know that. I don't think either.
No, this is the first. This is the first time hearing of it.
But a bigger thing of why even I got to know Paul is because during this transition period of when I quit that last job and I'm transitioning to this one, and even why I feel like I have this job, um, a bigger part is getting to have more like we're serendipitously like Paul was hosting like a philosophy of yoga workshop in the beginning of this year. And then even before that, he did a clarity workshop, which I did last year. And then I did it again this year. So I've done his clarity workshop twice. But the reason I'm bringing this up is just where I spent many hours talking to Paul, and I still feel like we barely touched the surface. Because every time we talk, I'm always just like, oh, we just peeled back one layer of the onion of how much I feel like Paul and I can really get into things.
So much appreciated that you're doing this with me, man. Really, really. And I agree, excuse me, wholeheartedly that we have many more layers to peel back. And this is the first of hopefully many conversations like this. And I feel like we should open these to the public because I know that more people would like to have these talks than those that are having them. And one of the coolest things about hosting what you mentioned, the clarity workshops and the yoga philosophy workshops at True Fusion, is that True Fusion is an awesome studio for fitness and yoga, and yet spirituality really isn't emphasized. And I mean, why would it be? It's a fitness studio and a physical yoga studio. I mean, to me, yoga philosophy, and life optimization is part of is inherent in yoga, but it's not always done that way in studios. So the fact that we had the chance to do three events at True Fusion and you attended all three of them is just so amazing. So here's another platform, this YouTube live thing that we're doing that can hopefully get more people interested in it. And whatever we talk about here possibly will inspire others to join the conversation and maybe question some things and tweak some things and make some changes. Just like you said, it's great for your life and it makes you look inward and maybe change some things. But I don't personally have much of an agenda other than, I mean, I can ask you 100 questions, but do you have some things in mind specifically you want to talk about first? Or else I can ask you some things, but you tell me what's on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that I was like while we were prepping for this is because I really feel called to like get people on this, get people interested in what the work you're doing that's beyond these labels because the titles can be misleading, right? Where this philosophy of yoga workshop, two things that come about where it might be kind of triggering for people of thinking like, I'm not really into philosophy, and I'm not really into yoga. But those beyond those, the thing I think is a commonality between any human that's currently living in this time is a busy mind. And what I mean by that is like, I feel like a lot of the discussions that we had were ultimately about how people through all throughout civilization, throughout thousands of years, we discussed many different regions, different religions, different practices in which people uh, basically discussed how to deal with a busy mind. And yoga is just one form, but we talked about a lot of like theology and religion. And that's where I feel like, I know that you labeled it as like a philosophy yoga workshop, but for me, the thing that I felt from it was more of like almost like a world religions class. And ultimately, like spirituality too, that's where I think, at least especially from a medical background, one of the things that I want to clarify is like for people that when they hear spirituality, it can be triggering, because especially if people have had bad experiences with religion, or they already feel like I only believe in what I can see, which we know someone that in our group that felt that way, which is totally understandable. But
Very much
I
so.
think that hearing how other people think about things, I've come to appreciate that we can all kind of see the world very differently, and getting to appreciate how other people see the world and find their peace. You take pieces from that. I take pieces from that, and it gives me peace. And I think ultimately that's what I hope, where people, when if they take or clip anything of like a tag point of like wanting to join your workshop, is like, how do other people find peace of mind and hear that and be immersed in that? Because that's the big thing too. When you're around other people in this environment, it creates a whole different experience. Just like the difference between watching Zoom yoga versus doing yoga in a group, whole different experience. Is that what I mean, how would you describe your intention compared to like what I kind of took away from it? Do you feel like it was like um similar, or do you feel like it's different of like what you were kind of going for in that?
Very similar, very similar. I really shy away from using any type of word like lecture or I'm giving a talk or giving a class. I know I do call them classes sometimes. I would rather call them discussion groups because exactly of what you said. We can learn from each other. And it does take an open-minded individual to participate in one of these things because gosh, if you're a religious person and you believe in certain doctrine, I don't know that you'd ever attend a comparative religions workshop or class. You might not be open to that. But yet at the same time, you might still be a seeker and looking for ways to make life more peaceful. And I would hope that even if you're a staunch religious person or a very strict believer in whatever set of beliefs you believe in, that you still would be curious if is there more or is there a different way? And I would hope that I'm the same way too. And I always start my classes and talks and discussion groups with a disclaimer that hey, I'm only one person and I share from one perspective. And if you feel that I'm not being open, call me out on it because I'm teaching openness. I'm teaching check it all out and see how the world works with an unbiased lens, an uncolored lens. And if you see me not doing that, please tell me. So yes, in that respect, coming together, sitting in a group, whether it's a circle or in rows or however, close proximity physically, not on Zoom. I mean, Zoom works. It does work. It's different though. But coming together, feeling other people's energy, allowing vulnerability, and then yes, I'm going to guide the discussion. Remember, I have handouts and we have things to fill out, and I do have a structure. But where the juice really is squeezed is when we start sharing together. I hope, and I'm so glad that you believe this, that I spark thoughts and perhaps more questions and then discussions where everyone can share something. And that's great. And even if not everyone shares, something's going on inside, I think. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. So the next philosophy course that's coming up, I really hope we have a good group in person. I love the group energy. I'm a sucker for group energy. We're going to have more people online this time because my dear friend Tanya, who I do the Costa Rica retreats with, she lives in Minneapolis and that's where her yoga community is. And her studio is hosting this next one online. So I'm going to have as many people here in this house as I can because I love the group energy and the proximity, but we're going to also have a big um, group online as well. So back to your question, do I view it the same way you are viewing the benefits of it? Yes. the group learning together. You also mentioned the target or the intention or the aim being the busy mind, and how do you address the busyness of our minds and the potentially misleading titles of the workshops. And yeah, I think you're on to something big, because I thought that a lot more people would be interested in the yoga philosophy workshop. I was so glad to see 13 of us at the last one. That was more than I thought. This time around, I know it's only 8 months later, but I thought more people would be interested in it, especially all the yoga teacher friends that I know and all the people who take yoga. But I think maybe you're onto something with the title. The title not maybe being enticing enough or magnetic enough. When we target something that's more tangible, like your monkey, like how to calm the monkey, how to create calmness in your life, like calmness class, come see how to get calm, like see how to, I mean, not so elementary as that perhaps, but how do you fix your shit class?
No, for real. Like that's what we kept on. Like I feel like all like every chapter was just like another way of how like another because you would I can't really remember exactly how you summarized every chapter every week, but it felt like every week was like a different approach of how someone else did it, how someone else fixed their shit, you know?
Jason, I really appreciate you saying that. Let's look at some of the chapters. I actually did that recently since I'm prepping for the next one that starts in a couple weeks. I like that you said that. And yeah, my intention at the first one was 10 sessions and was to have 10 different topics that address like all the areas of life that spiritual seekers know about but don't have a lot of information on. Like what we all hear of karma, we all hear of the soul, we all hear of reincarnation. What is that? What do those actually mean to our lives specifically, tangibly? Like how do we address the results of that? And so every single, oh look, I have a friend here who's somebody wanted to come say hi.
Hello?
This is Nataya. Mwah. She actually jumped in my lap. That's very rare. Usually she's just like meowing and running away. Let me pull up the syllabus here and let's check out a couple of the chapters. Let's see. So week 1 was an overview. Week 2, we titled it Worldview. And the first question that we asked was, how do we see the world around us at a microscopic level, like our intimate family, and then at a macroscopic level, like how do we see our physical place on the planet and in the universe? Like I love doing these kinds of like zoomed in views and then zoomed out views and correlating them. And that's important. Like if the world doesn't have meaning to us, that's where a lot of pain and suffering comes from. And then on the flip side, some people, I wish Kyle was here because he's our materialist friend who needs to physically touch it to believe it, physically hold it and see it to believe it. Some people that are like Kyle, and I'd like to hear his opinion, take comfort in not knowing though. Like sometimes they say, no, I don't want to know what happens after death because it's just too much. I don't care. I'm going to focus on the now. And hey, that's cool too. But the idea that we want to talk about is let's figure out what we believe in. Like, let's just define our worldview. What is it? Do we believe this? Do we believe that? Or do we not care? Whatever it is, let's just be aware of it. And it's the same thing with God. That's one of our chapters too, is on the nature of is there a deity at all? And if there is, why is there suffering in the world? And some people don't know. Like a lot of our yoga friends are spiritual, meaning they certainly believe in things that are non-physical, metaphysical. But a lot of my friends that I talk to, and a lot of people that are in our classes, have never sat and thought about what is God. That's a big daddy question right there. Is there a being that rules the universe?
And so there's layers to like you're making me think about a couple things of like even a part of me where I identify with all those parts actually. Like that's where I always I feel like I'm a bit like amidst the class, like I always like I'm like Switzerland or neutral, kind of like where I kind of like I identify with a part of me that that recognizes in my brain that I'm like I need data. That's like my where I'm trained and very conditioned that way. And then there's a part of me that just has faith, right? Where it's just like I believe in things I can't see. But my point is that there's both parts of those brains get anxious about the conflict between that those that those two ideas, um, where the idea that two things can be true, how can two things be true? And my point is that like where sometimes and a part of me thinks about, that's why even some people might even be can stray away from this type of work, is because it taps in, just like doing yoga, right? Where it's going into a place where you're going to be uncomfortable and stretch into areas of your edge. It's uncomfortable. It's like, oh yeah, this is like what is the value in it? And someone asked me, one of my friends asked me that because he was asking me what I was like spending my time doing. And I was like, go to these workshops and like kind of question what is reality and the meaning of life. And he's like, what's the value of that? Like once you find that information, what do you do with it? And my answer to him, because like sometimes where people just feel more stuck, right? Where it's almost like the Santa Claus phenomenon, where it's like, no, Santa Claus isn't real, or even if he is or isn't real, like how does that like affect my life? And for me, I'm going on kind of little tangents, but going back to this main point of like, what do I think the value in going into those areas that are uncomfortable to talk about is, where just like yoga, you just go into this place and realize that questioning truths isn't a place to like, you know, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's questioning why it's uncomfortable. Is it questioning like, oh, am I scared of death? But the more I learn about the possibilities of whether there is or isn't an afterlife, the more I'm okay with it even happening. You even kind of talked about this. Like, I think we had this like point of discussion where in a lot of life, we kind of like a lot of those previous like cultures and religions, like they talk about death, like, so it normalize it, like where it's this thing of like we're preparing for it, versus like, oh yeah, it just comes out of nowhere and it's the end, versus like, okay, let's like just again going back to the stretching and basically physical conditioning that we do, whether it's exercise or yoga, we're preparing for extremes so that we don't have injuries in those moments. Same idea as I look at spirituality, because like death is inevitable, right? But it's this idea of like, if we can talk about it and understand how other people talk about it, I can take away from that and prepare myself so that I'm okay with the inevitability, not only for myself but for my loved ones.
You're touching on some very, very profound concepts. The idea of death should certainly be normalized. It really should. And it's sad that death is always sanitized in a way. And I'm borrowing that term from Eckhart Tolle. He says that exact thing in his book A New Earth, how death is like cleansed and sanitized, and it's not really talked about. It's shunned away. In other cultures, it's absolutely not. And that's part of the it's that is so counterintuitive to do it that way, the way the Western world does, because that creates this mystery and this like, ooh, we don't want to look behind that door because there's something very bad there. But no, talk about what's behind the door and make it normal, and then that plays into a much larger topic that you're touching on, which is the temporary nature of everything. You said death is inevitable. Well, every end, the end of everything is inevitable too, and death proves that. Most people's minds go to their relationship, their love relationships with their partners or their children, and those are probably arguably the hardest things to think about losing. But death doesn't spare anyone. And just thinking about these things, talking about them, and just normalizing them just eases some of the tension when it gets near. Similar to the body conditioning, we're preparing our bodies to be healthy, just like we can prepare our mind and emotions to transition. It's really not that hard. It's simple but not easy to do at first. It's uncomfortable. In theosophy, and I should probably explain what theosophy is because a lot of my background is theosophical. But one of the texts that we used a lot in our yoga philosophy course was a theosophical book, and on the chapter of on life after death, I love the way the author describes it. He says that we should prepare for death just like we prepare for a vacation.
Mm.
We should research. We should understand the conditions of the place we're going. We should not necessarily pack physical things because you can't take them with you, but maybe unpack, or which is packing in a way, unpack unresolved energy so you don't spend so much time in the astral plane after the body dies, slowly evening out any tough vibrations that you wouldn't let go of in life. So prepare for a vacation, research the fares, how much does it cost, how are you going to get there, and then plan for death also. Isn't that interesting?
See, and this is a good glimpse of why I think you create a great space to have these tough discussions, because you bring a little levity to it in your voice and tone. But it's just that, right? Where if I'm only associating death with being this very somber state of never of basically losing like everything. But even that, it's like, is that even, if I can associate that to be something more positive or even like beautiful, then it becomes like a vacation, right? Where
I know, and it does carry the implication that you'll return from the vacation too, which I know some people don't believe, but you, in a certain way, we do, and that's where the comparative religion part comes in, and I personally take solace in that, in the fact that I do think I'm going to return from the vacation. It's not permanent. I don't think anything's permanent. Death isn't permanent either. Now, this physical flesh, I guess that's not permanent, but atoms are never completely destroyed, right? Matter is never created nor destroyed. It just changes. So in a sense, this body, it changes, but it's not going to ever become the same thing again. But oh gosh, these conversations are certainly great to have, and my hope is that people will hear these things and then live differently. Like if you life doesn't have to be so mysterious. A lot of people think life is very hard, especially after COVID, after the pandemic. So much changed. I have a lot of friends who think life is very, very hard, and how a lot of my friends think that we're going to have more catastrophes. I don't personally believe that, but a lot of people do. They say, brace for it. It's still coming. We're going to have tanks driving down the streets and martial law. And I'm like, I don't feel that, but so many people feel that life is very, very hard. And I don't know. I mean, in Ukraine it is, in other places it is. What do you think? Do you think life is hard?
so this is where it's relative. I've had this discussion with like one of my friends' parents, like was again going back to like they were asking me what I was doing with my time, and it came to this point of like the discussion of like generations have different problems, right? And it's all relative. Like if you go back 1,000 years, every 1,000 years, like it's always just like every generation has it better than the next, and rightfully so. That's evolution. It's like in going from a parental standpoint of the human species, like if I had kids, I would want their lives to be easier than mine was. That's the way. It shouldn't be this resentment. But going back to this point of like, of do we have it easier? I think, yeah, like there's a lot of things that have gotten like in terms of what we struggle for, it's a different problem, right? Like I think that we're not afraid of like, it's not about like looking for water or getting attacked or even worried about war of like someone like coming up and shootings do happen, but it's on a lower probability. But I do think that what's
In this
happening,
country, at least.
yeah, I do think what's happening of like what's causing that kind of mindset, even in like America, more so in places where maybe we shouldn't always be worried about that at all times, is the news, right? It's all about exposure. So it's like this hyper awareness of an alert. Like it's this constant beeping alarm that's always on, like beep, 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 beep. Like whenever you turn on the news, it's just like that's what is that's what attracts attention, is just this idea of catastrophe attracts attention, no differently than if there's a car accident on the freeway. Even though I've seen a million car accidents, I'm still going to be like, I wonder what's that about. And I think the mind from an evolutionary standpoint is used to conditioned to do that. Like it's just like, I want to look at like fire, squirrel, fire, like trying to keep us alive. But I think that our us as a civilization is getting used to this much direct, immediate like cause and response. And that's where I think that, again, going back to what I think you kind of touched upon it, like the value of what your class does is gives another glimpse of like, again, what people have done in the past to make sense of the world. And I think that the universal thing of like, no matter if we go back 100 years, 200 years, and go all over the world, people are always catastrophizing. There was always catastrophe. I think that's just a natural part of like, whenever there's massive amount of people and some people will get hurt, and just no differently than a whole beehive, right? Not all the bees will survive, and they're all constantly trying to survive. And it's this constant sense of like high alert, ease amongst the seasons. But going back to your question of like, do I think things are worse? No, I think most definitely, like, where if you look again, just the general population, we have yes, there are problems, but the problems are different. There will always be problems, but I think that's like a great thing of like what you kind of even touched upon, like the Buddhism and even the idea of suffering and non-attachment. A lot of those things you touch upon, and I think that those, even though I had heard those things before, I think a big thing when I'm around other people, I start to feel it more. I start to feel this sense of like how to tap into that space of like non-attachment, or what that means to someone. and and I think this is what I wanted to go back to, where you were saying like, I hope people hear this and live a little differently. I think that is very a great tagline of what your actual intention, I mean, what I took away of feeling your intention is like. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes, I most certainly can. Living differently comes in many, many ways, obviously, because we all live very different lives. There are 7.5 billion different ways to live because there are 7+ billion different people. Hearing some concepts that might help you live differently. Well, learning from others is beautiful because you don't have to go through some of the pain that they went through. And sometimes you do, though. So sometimes we do have to feel the pain. Let's see. Specifically, though, hearing the theory about thought control is great. And like being academic and reading about, all right, our thoughts do this, neurons fire when this happens, and then there's a chain reaction of chemicals in the body. That's all great. But when you actually try to sit and watch your thoughts in meditation, things change and you begin, it's revealed to you how chaotic our mind actually is. And that, I think it all starts there. I think this whole concept of living better, living more sufferless, sufferlessly, starts with watching the mind, and that requires introspection. That requires the bravery of turning the focal point in instead of out to the outside world, searching and looking and trying to fix everything and everyone. And that takes some bravery first. I went to the Michael Jackson show last night at Mandalay Bay. It was his birthday yesterday, and my girlfriend Natalia is in the show, and so there was a big celebration. And I have to admit, she's going to hate me. She's not going to hate me. She's going to cringe when I say my favorite Michael Jackson song is "Man in the Mirror." It really is. Well, everyone knows the lyrics. If you want to make a change, okay, start with the man in the mirror, right? You have to look at yourself objectively and be real about what's there. And once you start to realize that some of our habitual thoughts are not healthy, it all starts there. Living differently starts there. And it's simple. It really is simple. And I always say this in all my yoga classes and meditation classes, just start by watching your breath. And the simple act of closing your eyes and sitting and then just taking a few breaths, and it brings the mind to a sense of focus. And the very simple definition of meditation is one pointed awareness, like bringing your mind to one point. And to me and to a lot of people, the simplest thing to focus on is the breath. You can focus on a trillion different things. I can focus on Grogu, which I do sometimes. I love Grogu. I can focus on the Tesla Performance Model Y that I love driving, but I preferably focus on something pure, like your heart or the word love or your breath. And then that in and of itself will shift perspective like almost immediately. And then you can watch your thoughts. Then you can separate your consciousness from your brain. Whoa, sorry, materialists, but the consciousness is different from the brain. I'm going to stand here and proclaim that your brain, from a yogic perspective, does not generate your consciousness. And the second you calm the mind, calm the brain, you then have the ability to become aware of the brain. Well, who's aware of the brain? Well, that's your true self, your higher consciousness that you're accessing. That act immediately will start to change the way we live. And then you start to see the world differently a little bit. And we start to realize we have more control than we thought. And you were saying that life might not be as hard now as it was before. And I believe that. And then when we do this tactic of watching the thoughts and learning that we do some habitually unhealthy thinking and feeling, we get more control and we can shape our day even more and we can control our energy even more, and life will get a little bit easier. Now, that does not at all mean that we're not going to have challenges, because the whole point of life, I usually say the purpose of life is to learn and grow, but I'm going to say something different. I'm going to say the purpose of life is to overcome challenges. Of course, we're gonna not overcome some, and then we'll have to repeat them. But I'm gonna say that's the purpose of life. And when you start to watch your thoughts and realize you can sort of steer a little bit, maybe puppeteer your thoughts a little bit more than you thought was possible before, you can navigate the challenges a little bit better. You can learn faster, and then you can teach others, dude. Like I see you doing that. Like you, that, tell me why you're sharing every single class your thoughts on yoga. Are you do? I'm sure that's not That's not completely selfish. But I love that you do that. I believe you're helping others. What is your motivation for that? Because it's brilliant the way you do that.
Oh, that's really kind of you, man. Especially coming from you, because um, I look at it as is where a lot of like what we're doing here is that these thoughts that I have that have helped me, it's no differently than the way I look at medicine. It's like I don't want to be a gatekeeper to this information that's helpful.
Exactly. Exactly. Keep going, please. I'm just excited. Please.
And it's this concept of like where it is for me to like remember these are flashcards so that I can consolidate information, or else it's like a fart in the wind, right? Where I'm like a good feeling where it's like, oh, this is great, and then you just let it go. Just like this is where it's always like on to the next thing. But if I really reflect on why this moment mattered, this event, this what I took away from like the what this teacher provided for me, because that's what I another thing is like I want to elevate yoga instructors. That's another thing that I've really come to, even though I've been practicing for like 6 years, but it's like those first 5 years compared to this last year. And I think maybe there are parts of like where the spirituality of like your workshops have really helped me get in touch with this higher level of the practice. And my point is that like where I think that there's two aspects. One is where I want to really imprint on my mind what I took away from this class, because then it holds more longevity, and it gives me a more of a reference point, this versus this yoga only being for that hour. It's not just for that hour. It's like, oh, I can feel it longer. And then the other part is elevating and highlighting yoga instructors for what they do, because as you know, as an amazing yoga instructor, it's like it's beyond this practice of like, oh, I'm just telling people what to do for an hour. It's like I feel like they're giving a piece of themselves, like no differently than a musician or an athlete, where they're giving a piece of their wisdom onto them, these people, like they're training. I was like, this is beautiful. I love this practice, and I love like this concept of like what I envision hopefully one day is like really just learning how, because the other thing I'm learning to do is learning how to um communicate what I feel, like beyond like this, because it's a language. That's what I really, again, a big part of like the Dharma that you helped me find within myself is being a bridge between Eastern and Western medicine, of just looking at it as health. And a big part of communicating this is like practice, right? I need like, just like I remember Chris brought this up during like yin instructor training, where it's just like, it's like repetitions, like, right? Like the nuances come through repetitions, where the more I do it, the less I get in my head of just being able to be like, oh, this is what I feel right now. And I feel like you do that a lot, like where I mean, I don't know how you describe like the how you tap into those nuances of the moment, of like, where what you say during class isn't always, yes, there are some parts that are scripted, but there are so many parts that are just you're in the moment.
That's very true. Well, it's a flow state. It's a flow state, like we've talked about, and it's a moving meditation for the teacher as well as the student. And it's a very different meditation because, as you said, the teachers give of themselves. That's 1,000% accurate. We do it. It's a lot of energy expended, but we do it from love, man. And we similar intention to why you share your thoughts afterwards. I love that. And for those who haven't seen any of any of Jason's reflections, just follow him on Instagram. I love how you do it, man. You usually do it while you're walking out of the studio, so it's fresh, right? I think you rarely wait until later, right? It's
Yeah,
like as you're walking out, right?
yeah, it's just whatever comes to mind in that moment. um because that's the other thing too, right? It's because it's very fleeting, right? They just kind of come and go. They're even the good thoughts. That's why another thing too, right? Where we tend to latch onto the negative thoughts, but I think the more I do it, it's just focusing. And that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, is like where sometimes going back into the concept of like, sometimes when people go down these rabbit holes, they it people can, even I can find myself getting somewhat frustrated or paralyzed, but you seem to be almost freed. Like, do you see what I'm, do you see
Which
what I'm,
rabbit holes are you referring to? In the classes or just in life or?
rabbit holes of like, of spirituality, of like even these concepts of like who to, what to believe, who to believe. Do you think it's like one thing of like where you have like this is just outside looking in, it's like almost like you have you have an ability to surrender logic at times, like the things you can't see, right? Like that, going back to this concept of like um yeah, being able to believe in what you can't see.
Isn't it interesting that we all have our line in the sand? I'm willing to believe up to here, and then I'm not willing to believe anything.
You're right, absolutely. it,
Isn't
and
that interesting, though? Yeah.
I don't know what makes that gauge within us. I think
Right.
there's obviously with our own experiences. It's not like, oh, I've done this class, and I'm up to this level of
Yeah.
willingness to believe.
Well, here are the words, and then we'll talk more about the words. I'll share my thoughts in words, which are just English language that may or may not even make sense to a lot of people. But the simple explanation that I have is you when you know, and what you know when you know it. That's the and that's is that that might be empty words. Like for someone who has never experienced a spiritual connection with anything, wouldn't relate to that. And um, uh, a, um, materialist person, sorry for that, a materialist who chooses not to believe in anything super physical would say, "Cool, but that's BS." I mean, or to me, that's BS. Like I need you to, and then other people are way out in the spiritual realm, and they barely touch the physical ground with their feet. So everyone has their line that they choose to draw, and they believe up to a certain point, and I think that's fine. What I would ask though, and what I try to do is always stay open. Yes, we should hold beliefs. Yes, I steadfastly will proclaim that we should see the world and get a worldview that works for us. I do believe that's important. And be open to something new. I love learning from you. I love learning from Kyle. And and I love learning from my friend Nicole, who's one of the ones who barely touches the ground. She knows I call her woo woo all the time. So I've got the friends that don't believe in anything metaphysical, then I've got the friends that barely believe in the physical world. Yeah. You said that I seem a little bit free. Does that mean that I know what I believe and I'm good with it, or I have found my structure, or
I look
define
at,
that?
I look at that as where and free is in the best, when I mean that in the best form possible. Actually feel like that's what I feel um one of the steps to finding a greater purpose in life is to like is finding a path towards freedom, like whether that, and I think you do that through the desires class where it's like your moksha, your
Yeah.
finding. But anyways, going back to what I see in you is this concept of someone that knows them, that is so comfortable with themselves, they're free to make decisions and like be clear with what they want in life. And by doing that, you're able to like not get so bogged down by some of the distractions that happen to a lot of us, including myself. Because like example of like where um I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but it's just this concept of like what you've transitioned to in your life from like um being a real estate agent full time to working as this spiritual teacher, or this current chapter of your life. Does that make sense? And again,
Yes.
that's again very inspiring. That's like to most people, like that's like the scariest shit ever. That's freedom,
Jason,
man. That's fucking freedom.
boom. No.
Earned freedom though. That's the big thing.
Oh,
Earned freedom, because you've talked to me on like little side notes of how you've been planning for this. It's not just like you just decided this. You just like, yeah, it's not like you just
I,
decided last
you're
week.
you're you're right. It has taken planning, and I'm in uncharted waters. I'm not doing everything that I that I know is important to do when starting a new venture, because I have spent 19. It'll be in January. It'll be 20 years in real estate. Thanks for asking that, though. I appreciate that so much, and you're kind of a master at this discussion, because we spent a lot of time creating some groundwork, and then we looped it to this, which I knew you wanted to talk about this, and I'm glad you brought it here. Because I do enjoy sharing that, because it gives me it makes me feel more confident in what I'm doing when I share it. Like, you know how you when you put something out into the universe, it's like, oh crap, I just said it, I better actually do it. So the fact that you're prompting me to talk about it is helping me stay bold and stay strong with what I'm doing. All right, let's I first of all, I'm going to say that I'm going to use the word blessed. Now, you probably know that I don't believe there's a man in the clouds that is a god. I don't believe that he or she sends down blessings. But I'm going to say that I'm blessed. Now, however the universe does that, whatever the word blessing means, you can take it as that. But I feel blessed. I feel that I'm being assisted and aided and granted grace and assistance by something greater than myself, which could be God. So knowing that, I do feel that I've had help. And you might remember this from the yoga philosophy class, that I quote Eckhart Tolle directly. He has something called the three modalities of awakened doing. And the very basic level of anyone who's working towards enlightenment needs to learn how to accept things without fighting reality, accept without saying, this isn't fair. And then the next level up is, after you've accepted, learning to acknowledge the source of joy, which is not doing anything fun or enjoyable on the outside. That's not the source of joy. The source of joy comes through a magic portal that opens in you when you're present, and you can be scooping poop. You can be you could be vacuuming your stairs and have joy, because the joy does not come from the activity. We think it does, because we're magically open and loving in the moments that we share with loved ones and do fun things that we enjoy. But the joy doesn't come from them or that or it. It comes from inside. So that's the second modality. Then the third level, once you get pretty good at acceptance and recognizing the source of joy, he calls the third one enthusiasm. And the word enthusiasm means in God. Entheos means in God. And he says that when you do the first two, and then you add some kind of spiritual goal that supports your soul's purpose, dharma, living your dharma code. He says then the universe frickin' aligns and helps, and you become an arrow shooting through space and time towards your target. And dude, I feel that. I feel that. And I'm not saying that I did anything special. I'm just doing what Eckhart Tolle instructed. I believe in him. So I'm practicing acceptance. I'm trying to find joy in everything. And I'm adding a spiritual goal, which is helping me do it. And the spiritual goal is helping others do this. It's helping others do it. So that's a little bit of a summary, but I can talk more about it unless you have something to add. Looks like you want to say something. No?
No, I mean, I love, like, you're reminding me so much of what I'm getting from being around you, of like,
Oh,
and it's actually one of the great things that of Kobe Bryant, like, who I really admire. Like, he always one of his monikers for success is like, how do you use your passion to help others find their passion? And
amazing.
that's where I'm like, oh, Paul, like, that's what I see in you, where I'm like, you're taking your passion and providing a space for others to, like, to learn that same thing.
To me, it makes so much sense. And like I was kind of saying in jest before, that when you know, you know. Well, I found what I'm good at, and I'm going to play to my damn strengths. And I know I'm not good at things like numbers. I can't do a math problem in my head to save my life, unless it has to do with like real estate commission. I can do those calculations. Like, if a house sells for this much, that much commission. I'm being a little funny about that, but I know what my strengths are, and I'm going to play to those strengths. And my weaknesses, I'm going to try to hope that I have friends and good people on my side to help me with that. Going back in time to 2003, when I started in real estate, I didn't have a clue about spirituality. I was brought up in a Christian household, but then my whole entire teens and early 20s, I didn't pay much attention to church, and I was always an inquisitive person, and I was always curious about life, but I didn't spend much time investigating. Excuse me, until when I was 19, maybe right before I got into real estate. A friend of mine took me to a PSI seminar, Psi seminars, and many people who are going to watch this have heard of that. Have you heard of Psi seminars?
Oh,
It's a self development course, and it has several levels. There's the basic course, which is like a weekend, like a Thursday night, Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And there are a couple other organizations that are kind of parallel, like Choice Center is one, and there's a few others. But when I was invited to that, it was the first time I'd ever done something self development like, where we meditated, and we did an onion peeling exercise where we sat in stillness, and there was a nice song playing, and there was the facilitator was amazing, and he told us to look inside and imagine that our being is like an onion, and we have this like rough exterior shell that we use to guard ourselves and protect ourselves. And he said the sweet meat, the juicy part, the good part is inside, and we need to see that goodness. And so that was the very first time I'd ever done anything like that, and that was a seed that was planted. Then a few years later, another opportunity came to learn about meditation, and that was when I met Terry Hunt, my spiritual mentor, the guy that he and I ended up becoming super best spiritual buddies, and we wrote a book together. But a few years, so between that PSI seminar, about 4 years had passed. No, yeah, about 4 years had passed. And then I met Terry, and he was teaching classes on theosophy, which is, I mentioned earlier, I would say what theosophy is. It's very simply the comparative study of science, religions, and philosophy, the comparison and understanding of how science works in the world, philosophy works, and religions, to try to understand the cosmos, the purpose of life. And in the theosophical teachings, there's a lot of meditation, a lot of talk about the soul's journey. And so I met Terry, and I was then receiving like clear, tangible definitions of what is this? What is the soul? How does karma work when you can't see it and feel it? How does the power of thought relate to your body and to your emotions? Things like that. Things like, is there a purpose to it all? And so when I heard Terry explaining these things, I'm like, yes, this is what I was looking for without knowing I was looking for it. And it was like a freaking light switch or a lightning bolt. And I knew at that point, in 2006, I was, how old was I? Late 20s, mid 20s, I think. I knew at that point that I wanted to teach. And that was before I had ever stepped foot into a yoga studio, ever. Fast forward like 3 years, I took a yoga class in 2009 and still didn't resonate with yoga too much. 2 more years went by, and by this point, I was already teaching with Terry. Like, Terry and I were already traveling around United States and Latin America, because he's fluent in Spanish, and we were teaching with the Theosophical Society. I was kind of his sidekick, just learning what he does, how he navigates questions. When people say like, I don't believe that, Jesus Christ said this and Krishna said that, but watching how kind he was and how he always had some type of way to correlate things and understand, I'm like, oh, I want to teach like that. So, and still before I had ever taken some yoga that was meaningful. So 2011, I took a Bikram yoga class, and that's when I became hooked on physical yoga, because my body started to change. And I still didn't really make the connection between physical yoga and the spiritual teachings, even though I'd been teaching with Terry for several years already. But I started to. And then in 2012, we finished our book. And let's fast forward a few more years. So that was 2012, and then I started becoming I became a yoga teacher in 2013, taught physical classes, taught pranayama classes. I was approached by Mark Balfe Taylor in 2014 to assist with True Fusion's very first teacher training. And I did, and that was wonderful. And he and I worked together when the first True Fusion opened on Eastern back in 2014, I believe it was. Let's fast forward some more to 2018. Well, I realized, so this is 18, how many years into real estate? 14 years into real estate. I told myself, after I had done the Four Desires workshop, or what I call it the Clarity workshop. I'm not officially sanctioned to use the title of the book Four Desires by Rod Stryker. I call it the Clarity workshop. This is after I had done that process several times. I made a 5-year plan for myself to transition out of real estate, since I knew that I knew that what my purpose was. My purpose was to teach in various capacities, teach yoga classes, teach meditation, and help people calm that damn busy mind that you said earlier, because that's where it all starts. It does start here, and then it translates to emotions, and then to the physical body, and then to the external world. But it starts here in the mind. So in 2018, I said, "Yo, universe, 5 years, baby, 5 years." In 5 years, I'm going to transition and start driving my income from teaching yoga. Well, when COVID hit in 2020, I honestly kind of forgot about my 5 year plan. I got lazy and I threw everything up in the air, and just like a lot of people did. And but here we are in 2023, and now I'm doing it. I worked up the guts in late 2022 to let my office go, my real estate office go, and I've slowly been more vocal about telling people that I'm not doing real estate full time anymore. And I'm realizing that I have to still work though. Like sometimes I get very lazy because I made a great living in real estate, and it I got lazy a little bit because real estate came easy. I feel that I got really good at the communication aspect of real estate, and the technical aspects of it, learning how to value properties and do escrow and commission checks and like escrow deposit, that I can do with one hand tied behind my back blindfolded. The skill that I think I got really good at is communicating. And so real estate came pretty
Hmm.
fairly easy. So I got a little bit lazy, and now that I have transitioned into teaching yoga and meditation. I'm like, okay, I need to build an income though. I never even cared about earning any money from real estate before, or from yoga before. I forgot half the time how much I was making for doing a workshop. I would forget to cash a check from the studio because I wasn't doing yoga for the money. I had a job in real estate. But now I know that this is my career, and I've made peace with the fact that we live in a world where money is important, and I've made peace with the fact that I can charge for teaching yoga and meditation. It does seem strange to charge for that, but that's what I'm doing, and I think I can, and I'm going to keep going.
No, I mean, you touched on a couple of things that I'm like very fascinated by in terms of even what gave you the courage to take that leap even like do you see that like where you mentioned you mentioned that very seamlessly of like where 5 years like where that moment like where after the and I know that's a whole other thing that we maybe can't touch in this episode of like what the clarity workshop does because I can see you doing I can see you taught us how to do that but there's a difference between having the thought and actually doing it. You see what I'm saying? Like
Of
where
course.
again a big part of like what I see in your a skill set that you have is that that freedom that's and I don't look at it as like some people can look at that as like of like it's like blind faith almost but it's like no it's like it's almost like which a lot of life is when I really think about it is like blind faith like we all hope we wake up in the morning but my point is that this whole concept of like you took this big leap of faith do you feel like you always had that in you to like all to that kind of confidence within yourself and tapping into that belief.
I'm going to say no. No, I don't. I'm not a risk taker, and I'm not the sprinter. I'm the tortoise. I am the tortoise. I am the steady Eddie, and I don't want to imply that I took a big leap because, dude, I didn't, and I'm not going to even give up my real estate license. Like I had Mackenzie. You know Mackenzie Taylor from our philosophy, from both philosophy. She and her husband have trusted me with their real estate transactions for the past few years, and today we signed for the sale of one of their properties. And so, I that was my only escrow though, and so now that's closed. I have zero escrows, and it's extremely disconcerting because that was my income, and so now I'm relying on all the things I'm doing in yoga to provide the mortgage payment for this house and for my car and things. So, but let me just reiterate that I didn't take a huge leap. It was a very slow burn, and remember I've overlapped for a long time. Like I took my teacher training with Zeke in 2013. I started teaching classes right away at Yoga Sanctuary, and so I was learning to teach yoga, and then I started doing pranayama workshops in maybe 2014 or 15, and started doing teacher trainings with Mark Balf Taylor, and then it's blossomed into many other studios that I've done teacher. So I've been building that up for a long time. I just never focused on the money of it, never. And so now I'm trying to focus on the money, and it's different.
Hmm.
It's a challenge. But there was one factor that did happen late last year that really did give me the confidence to do it, and I'll tell you what it is. And it's it's interesting how it happened. But so before I say what that is, I will say that I enjoy adventure, but I also enjoy sitting my ass on the couch, and I can be very comfortable. And Natalia will laugh when she hears this, but I love to lead a life of comfort. I do. My dad is a construction worker, and I never wanted to go help him get my hands dirty. I like to be comfortable. And at the same time, I've taken multiple international trips by myself. I've gone across the ocean multiple times alone. I've taken road trips by myself, and I like to go to Sedona by myself. And I've done a lot of things, um, adventure, spontaneous style as well. But in terms of other risks, no, I'm not a big risk taker. So this thing is it is quite disconcerting for my being in several ways. But I figured out how to save money in real estate, and I bought some investment properties. And so I have four investment houses that don't really pay anything monthly because I have mortgages on them, but they pay a little bit, which I have to leave in the accounts for repairs and stuff. So I don't really make, but I have those for the future. I have money in the bank, and I have a few deals in real estate going. But the one thing that pushed me over the fence, it was very precise and specific. And I do believe it was my Eckhart Tolle moment where I was using enthusiasm. The universe was helping. One of my great real estate clients decided to ask me to help them buy the largest house I've ever dealt with in my 20-year career in real estate. And it was a $2.2 million house that closed escrow. What month was it last year? It was close to the end of the year, and it was the biggest transaction I'd ever had. And I said, if this isn't a sign to make this transition, I don't know what is, universe. Thanks. I appreciate you. I won't let you down. And so I put a check in the bank for like whatever it was, $60,000 or something, 50,000 after taxes. It's half of that, whatever. But that helped. And then so I said, yep. And so I gave up the office at the real estate office, and I started becoming more intentional about promoting more classes. And I converted my upstairs loft here at the house to a yoga studio, and I'm holding classes in the backyard. And I started charging on Eventbrite for some classes, but I'm still offering a bunch of stuff for free. I'm never going to not do free stuff. Like Terry and I have a study group coming up on a theosophical book called The Masters in the Path. No, sorry. It's called it's called the Mahatma Letters. And I have not mentioned this. I might have mentioned this in our philosophy. Is it backwards on the screen? Is the text backwards?
Well, I can read it. I can read it
Okay.
across.
It's called the Mahatma Letters, and this is a book about actual letters that were written from spiritual teachers back in the 100 years ago. Anyway, I'm bringing this up because we're doing a study group on this for no charge, and I do morning meditations for no charge, but I also have to make money somehow, and so I'm going to charge for the philosophy course that starts on September 10th. There's a fee to join that, and there are other fees, but I think I can make a living. I think it'll work.
And this is what I heard is that like basically it's this concept of like it wasn't this leap of faith because you prepared, and that's where again like you use the word blessings, but I look at it as like the phrase that I use for luck, or that I gravitates with me for luck, is this concept of luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And you've been preparing like all like even where all the to be able to have the connections you have within the yoga community is like through a solid decade of investment. So I think that's beautiful. I think that's like where it's like it's easy to look from the outside looking in and being like, oh, Paul just is falling into these things.
No, and I'm really glad that I was able to say all that, because I would feel like a fake if I said, oh, I'm just jumping ship. But no way, man. They've overlapped for a long time, and that's also how my real estate business was built. A lot of I've never been the go getter, like the hard salesperson. If you've seen The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, Some people have, but he had to cold call and make so many and make it happen. I was very slow when I got into real estate. I slowly built it over time, but being the tortoise, not the hare, is creates longevity. And I built a great real estate business, but my first couple of years were very slow. Other agents would have been like, "Yo, I'm going back to my other job, whatever it was." And that's kind of how this yoga thing is too. I started slow and it's blossomed, and yeah. Ooh, look at the we've been talking for an hour, man.
Yeah,
This is
no,
amazing.
this is great, Paul. I mean, again, I think I'm really hoping for this to be the first of many.
Jason, dude, I appreciate these conversations, man. I really do. What should we do next? Do you want to have another one like this? And
Oh, I would love to. I was like, this is so convenient, right? Like,
okay,
it's just like,
yeah,
dude,
yeah,
you have a free day, we just meet, talk, and like, and this is the thing. I feel like we would have this conversation anyways.
right,
We
right.
have had versions of this, but it's just this idea too of like where my biggest intention with this isn't to like, oh yeah, now we can just become like get that Joe Rogan money. It's more of like, oh, this is this is like a place to tap into that enthusiasm. Like what was the definition of enthusiasm again?
When you've learned to accept without fight, accept the world without fighting, and then allow joy to flow into what you do, and then add a spiritual goal to your work.
Yeah, man. That's why I think like why this like time flies and I laugh with you, man. And like this is like that thing of like where even though I mean, yeah, we've known each other for about a good over a year, but it's this concept of like whenever we talk, like there's always
I know it's deep. It feels
yeah,
meaningful.
yeah. It's like again, like where we've met before, you know, like this is just like where we're remembering that.
Yes, and soul connections, man. Do, are you willing to spend a minute or two telling us what's next for you? Are you in a transitory period yourself, or would you rather
Yeah,
save that for the next conversation? Up to you.
yeah. I'll talk about it a little bit, just like a glimpse of like, because I'm still kind of piecing that together. Even what this is like, this is what I envision a part of what I want to do. Because like you mentioned, I think that it's not just you and I that talk about these things because I've talked to like some of the yoga instructors, like Chris Blunt's a great example, right? Where I've had very, very deep conversations with her about how she looks at teaching. And even that's what even makes me want that's what brings me back to yoga so consistently are the instructors. That's where, don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for True Fusion, but True Fusion is a place, but the people are what make up that place. Like
Agreed.
you, all the instructors are like this foundation of like of what really I feel are helping guide me. And I've said this to like Chris, and I feel the same way about you. It's like there is this concept of I've always liked medical school and the journey to become a doctor, not because of the end goal, but because of the people I meet that I wouldn't
Mm,
have otherwise met. And it's through like you were one of your kind of pillars of like learning where when I'm in this kind of place of like where there's a mentor student relationship, no differently than Star Wars of like Jedi, that structure is like, oh, this is it gives this sense of purpose for where I'm like, oh, there's more to this. And then you give back, you keep on passing it forward and paying it forward. And it leads to this like infinite reciprocation, and that's what gives me this fulfillment. That's where I'm like I'm going back into this next what your question was of my next transitional state. Yes, I'm going back to traditional medicine in the sense it's a little like the good thing about Red Rock is get more time with patients, and my big thing isn't necessarily to like impose prescriptions of like spirituality necessarily, but it's to like be able to understand people and communicate and be able to offer this to people that are willing, like not necessarily like, oh yeah, go take Paul's class, but like, hey, if I have a sense of like you're interested in meditation, check out this YouTube channel where this someone that I listen to meditates, and like giving them that kind of glimpse. Because I think that our conversation is something that I think we've kind of talked about before, and I think you've touched upon too, where it's just like there are things in spirituality that science is catching up to, where like even like yoga nidra, right? Like Andrew Huberman talks about it, and he's talked about it with like even how the like the people at Google, he's like they're all into it because everyone's about optimization, right? So my
mhm.
point is that like that what I am feeling so compelled to like be a part of is just like because I feel like it makes my life easier too. Is like not I don't like just prescribing medications and like and that's another thing I'm actually doing too is on I'm doing this board certification for lifestyle medicine, which actually incorporates this concept of multimodal interprofessional kind of training, like where a clinic is just it is there is a coach, there is like a yoga instructor, there is a pharmacist, there is a doctor, and this being a place of like where no differently than like where the the yoga studio can be a place of like learning, teaching, healing, and that is the primary care office, you know, like that's
Wow.
what I really envision.
Wow.
I mean, that's why I love talking to you, because I really feel like you and a lot of the people that I've met at True Fusion, like it's like this feeling of like just the way that you mentioned that, like you just knew, you know, when you know, like that totally resonates with me. And for those that don't know what that feeling is, if you've ever been in love, that's what it is. It's like this concept of like there's no rhyme or reason. The logic behind love sometimes there isn't any, and that's where I think that's what beyond my physical body, beyond my logical mind, there is the spirit.
That's such a great analogy. Wow, that's really well said.
But no, thanks for asking, Paul. I feel like again, that's a whole we can talk. We can. I look forward to more of our future conversations.
I really do as well. And so Intermountain Health is going to be your new place of work?
Yeah, they're the umbrella company,
Mhm.
like, but I'll be specifically the primary care doc for Red Rock Casino employees. This is why another reason of like manifestation, man, like where like I'll be work like the clinic is in Red Rock, so it's right across the street from True
Oh,
Fusion.
come on. You really? And can you see public patients or just the employees?
So that's the tricky thing, is that like it's only for Station Casinos employees that have their insurance.
But
So
still, man, what a great gig for you. That's wow. Wow.
this job didn't exist too, until like April of this year, April or because they just got a deal. So my point is that like if I didn't quit my job, like all these things, it's this concept of like where this is a whole other conversation of what I define as what like when universal manifestation. It's not like this idea of like just the missing piece. I mean, the point is that like going back to what preparation meets opportunity is that a lot of these things happen. Yeah, there's some luck of just like, oh, right place, right time, but there is some preparation where I made a conscious decision to like leave the place I was because I didn't not because again, that's like where I relate to you too. It's like it's not that we left our job. I'm not going to speak for you, but I didn't leave my job because I wasn't going to make good money from it. I left my job because it didn't feel authentic to who I
We
was trying to
we
become.
share that. No, we share that. And
Yeah, that's what I felt
Jason,
now.
by the way, you're doing the enthusiasm bit as well. You're helping the world, and you're being provided with opportunities that literally were created a few months ago for you. I mean, I'm going to say that for you.
No, I feel it, dude. This is where I'm like, this is it, dude. Like where I'm like, this is like where I'm like, now's the time for action. Where that's like a big
Mhm.
thing of where, and what action means isn't necessarily like running and sprinting. It's just being very intentional. That's why again, your clarity workshop that I did this year, it was different than it was than it was last year, and I'm sure it'll be different again next year.
Oh man, thank you for saying that. I can't wait to talk next time. And I envision if we decide to keep doing these, we can invite other friends on like Chris Blunt and Dave Vandermeer and all the teachers that we that, right? Why
Oh,
not?
dude. No, I was talking to David. That's the other thing. But like, David's like, I want to talk to you and Paul. I was like, yeah, dude,
Yeah,
because I know that he's actually a great example too. It sounds like he said that you guys kind of lived together for a period of time, but he seems more on the side of Kyle. Like, I feel it's like you and me, and then Kyle and David. We would have like a great like kind
I
of.
know, but hold on. Did Dave tell you that he has a background in religion though? Okay, I know he doesn't, and I probably disclosed more than I might maybe should have. But yeah, that's I'm sure we'll flesh that out really well if he ever comes on here. Yeah,
It'll happen, dude. It'll happen. We're gonna make it happen. All
I
right,
know, I know. Jason, brother, thank you. This has been amazing.
dude. I'm so excited. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Have a beautiful night.
Till next time, brother.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Namaste.
Namaste, man.
Bye.